The Hypnobirthing Tool Kit is a complete hypnobirthing and birth preparation course helping you to go into the birth of your baby with confidence and positivity. It's completely self-paced with pre-recorded videos, presentations, audios, PDFs, plus monthly live classes. It's a more affordable and flexible way to learn hypnobirthing and help you have the positive birth experience you deserve. Follow the link in the description below to begin your positive birth journey today. Hello and welcome to the Bell Mama Hypnobirthing and Positive Birth podcast. My name is Ellie Waddington. I'm a hypnobirthing teacher, antenatal instructor and positive birth coach, and I'm here to help you go into the birth of your baby with a positive mindset. Every week I share my top tips, advice and amazing birth stories to help you go from fearful and anxious about your birth to positive and confident. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and let's get into this episode. Hey gorgeous mama and welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today I'm joined by special guest Bea from Bea's Birth and Boobs. Bea is a hypnobirthing teacher just like me and she is also a breastfeeding counsellor. Today in this episode she's going to talk to us all about the things that you can start doing now to prepare for a positive breastfeeding journey. I hope you enjoy the episode. Right, hello Bea, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to chat.
Yes, excellent. So if you could just start off by introducing yourself, who you are, where you are, what you do, and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. My name is Bea. I am a hypnobirthing teacher and antenatal instructor. I'm based in Leicestershire, Nottinghamshire. I'm basically where I am in a tiny little village, literally smack bang in between of Leicester and Nottingham. So I actually work for the NHS and the infant feeding team in Nottingham, but I live in Leicestershire and do a lot of my sort of private work in Leicestershire. So yeah, infant feeding support worker. I'm a breastfeeding counsellor as well. I tend to go on the National Breastfeeding Helpline quite a lot. So if you end up phoning there at some point, you'll probably get me at some point or another. And I also volunteer for our local breastfeeding group and our local Maternity Voices partnership as well. So I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing at the moment. Oh, also a mum of two. That's an important part as well, isn't it?
Excellent. You sound really, really busy.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot going on at the moment. Working part-time in the NHS, doing my private business, having children is just a job in itself, isn't it? It's just constant. And it's great fun because my husband's a chef, so he's very rarely home. I'm always doing dinner, bath and bedtime all by myself, and I'm just sort of running around like a headless chicken, I think, at the moment, and juggling a lot of plates.
Perfect. Sounds good. Having a chef as a husband, that must be nice.
It's quite nice. And actually, last night I made a really nice chili. And he messaged me. I was upstairs in bed anyway because he got home really late. And he messaged me and said, "This chili is really, really delicious." And I was like, "That's a compliment in itself coming from a chef." I'm like, I know when he says the dinner's nice, it's a nice dinner.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. Right, so today you're going to talk to us a little bit about preparing for a positive breastfeeding journey. And so to start off, would you just tell us sort of what do you think are the main obstacles, the main kind of challenges facing women today when they're sort of preparing for their positive breastfeeding journey? Why are people like you necessary?
Yeah, I think there's so many things that could be a barrier and could be impacting having a positive breastfeeding experience. But I think one of the main things is society and our expectations of babies and feeding. And the fact that as a society, especially, in the UK, we don't have a very breastfeeding culture. We are very much a formula feeding, bottle feeding culture. So we don't see it very often. So when it does come around to us having our babies, it seems like we just don't know much about it because it's not something that we've seen, really. We haven't spoken about it often. We've not seen our, aunts, not uncles, Jesus, not, we've seen various people breastfeed throughout our childhood and stuff. It's just not something that is seen anymore. So I think as a society, that's kind of the main thing. And the fact that we just don't understand what normal breastfeeding or normal baby behavior is. We kind of have this expectation of a baby should feed, then they should sleep in their cot for 3 to 4 hours, and then they should wake up, have another feed, and that should be how feeding goes, when actually in reality that isn't how it happens. And I think we've just lost sight of what normal baby behavior is in terms of especially breastfeeding, to enable us to have that confidence. I feel like one of the biggest problems with feeding comes from that. Actually, everything is going great with feeding. You know, the baby is feeding beautifully, having lots of wet and dirty nappies, everything's going great, but they're doubting themselves so much because their baby is not doing that scheduled 3 to 4 hourly feed, then settling in their cot. So I think, yeah, as a very long answer to your question, I think society is the reason why it's so hard to have that positive breastfeeding experience, especially at the start. I think once you've got into it and you have that knowledge, it does become easier and it does become positive and you have that confidence. But especially at the start, unless you've been surrounded by breastfeeding throughout your childhood, throughout your adult life, it's very difficult to just go into it with that kind of expectation.
Yeah, and I think this starts off like from day one, from when you're a little girl and you get given a doll for Christmas. Every single doll comes with a bottle. So,
Yeah,
so your first experience of being like nurturing and maternal is through feeding this baby a bottle, isn't it?
yeah, it is literally. So it's become that norm that if you have a baby, you bottle feed them. And I've, spoken to women and mums in the past where they've literally said to me, I didn't even know that breastfeeding was an option. Like literally didn't know that it was an option because all they've seen is bottle feeding. So it's absolute. This is what I mean about society. It being fully about formula feeding. And that's not a judgment on formula feeding. People choose that if they want to. But I think we are very much aware that a lot of people do want to breastfeed. About 80 to 85% of people go into their birth planning on breastfeeding and starting breastfeeding at birth. But by 6 weeks, that has gone down to about a quarter of people doing some form of breastfeeding. That's not fully breastfeeding. That will probably, most of those will be a combination of formula and breastfeeding. And a lot of those people, I think about 80% of those people that have stopped by that point, they've done so before they were ready to. So a lot of people are wanting to, but then because of, the thought process of not understanding that normal baby behavior, a lot of people have stopped before they actually wanted to.
80%. That is an absolutely crazy figure. Absolutely crazy figure, isn't it?
Oh yeah, so many stop before they want to, and that just breaks my heart, I think, because I want everyone to have the feeding experience that they want to. I'm not out here, same with birth, I'm not out here to get people to have a home birth. I'm not out here with breastfeeding wanting everyone to feed until 2 years old or beyond and having a self-weaning journey. Everyone's feeding experiences is very different, and some people, their idea of breastfeeding will be, I want to feed for 3 months and that's it. I want to stop at 3 months, and that's their journey finished, and they are happy with that. What I don't want is for people to be saying, yeah, I really want to feed until 1 year, getting to 3 weeks and going, I don't actually want to stop now, but something just isn't feeling like it's going well and I've not got the support, so I'm just going to stop. And then they're feeling guilt, regrets, and grief and trauma. You can absolutely get that from stopping breastfeeding. So I want people to have the journey that is actually right for them, not that's right for anyone else. It needs to be a journey that is actually yours and yours alone. And I am there to support everyone in supporting them to reach their breastfeeding goals, whatever they will be. That could be a week, it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could be a year, 4 years. I don't care what that goal is. I just want to help you to reach it.
Yeah, absolutely. And a point that I just thought of as well is with regards to society, we're being supported now by an older generation of women that were given really incorrect advice by their healthcare professionals. And that then gets passed down to us. And we think that there is something wrong with us or with our babies, when actually they were just really, really misinformed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was at the point where formula was very much sort of pushed upon new parents because they were told there's this brand new formula milk for babies that because it's man-made, it's exactly what your baby needs and it's better than breast milk. There weren't any sort of laws and regulations around the marketing for formulas at that point. So they were literally just told there's this milk that's amazing, you have to have it. it's the thing that you do now. You don't breastfeed anymore. This is this man-made amazing milk. So they were told this, so then they believed it. So we went through a point, like you said, with that generation, breastfeeding just wasn't a thing, and they were given all this information about feeding that isn't right now, and that is still getting passed along and passed along. So it's really hard. We're kind of like playing catch up a little bit at the moment, trying to actually overcome those incorrect, information and advice that people were given, and trying to push back on it, about responsive feeding and about cluster feeding and about the actual composition of breast milk and stuff, how it isn't the same thing as formula. We can never get formula the same as breast milk. It's just not possible, because breast milk is a living thing. So it's never going to be able to be the same sort of thing. So we're sort of really trying hard now to try to speak about the actual, the genuine facts about it, the actual evidence behind it, and science.
I can remember I saw an episode of Call the Midwife, I think it was last season, and Trixie was giving advice to some new mums saying, you all need to get your baby on a 4-hourly feeding cycle. And then a woman came in with mastitis, and she told the woman to stop feeding and bind her breath with mastitis. And I was literally like shouting at the TV,
at the telly.
And I was like, I understand this is like set in the 60s or whatever.
Yeah.
But there are going to be some people who don't make that connection. They won't think this is out of date advice, and they'll take that as gospel. And that was really, really painful for me to watch that. So many people are going to take that information in.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I know it seems like us saying that is, oh, well, it won't be that stupid or silly to actually, think that that's real. But it's not about being stupid. It's just about that message coming out. And you've heard it so many times before, like from your mum, from your grandma, that actually just hearing it again on the telly, it's just more and more ingraining that 4-hourly message into your brain. It's just that constant reminder of it.
Yeah, particularly since Trixie, although she's an actress playing a character, she sat there on your screen in a nurse's outfit. That's a figure of authority that you're subconsciously going to take that message in as a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard about this. I didn't watch it myself, but I heard loads of people talking about it, and I was like, there should almost be like a caveat at the start of every kind of period drama with anything that just goes, a reminder that this happened many years ago, and we now know that there's differences with advice and various different things. Things do change in medicine and stuff. So I think literally just in every period drama, not just the episodes that are about breastfeeding, but the ones about anything, literally just a caveat at the beginning of a reminder that this is from a long time ago. Don't panic about the advice. Please do contact your doctor, contact someone to get up-to-date information if you're worried, because a lot of what is going to be coming up is going to be outdated.
Yeah, and I think there's also an element as well of the older generation kind of feeling like they somehow did it wrong, like we're shaming them because they did it wrong. And it's so important to note that that's not your fault. You did the best with the information that you were given at the time, but it's always a case of know better, do better,
Yeah, we're constantly learning when it comes to being, like, literally constantly. There are things that were happening with my first, who was born 6 years ago, that now with my second, that was born a year ago, are different, because we have learned, we've done more research, and we're understanding more and more things. And it's just about knowing that, things are going to change constantly, because we're doing more and more research, and that's absolutely fine. It's okay to just go back and go, oh, okay, well, I did the best that I could with the information, with the knowledge, with the research that we had. Now things are changing a little bit, so I'm just gonna up to date on that as well. And it's okay to know that it's not someone doing anything wrong.
Yeah, and a really good example of that is with my first, when I had a blocked duct, I was told to like use an electric toothbrush or a vibrator to unblock it. But with Annabelle, they were told, oh no, don't do that. No, that's going to cause more damage. And I was like, really? Has that really changed in like 3 years? But no, it does. It changes that quickly.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, like, we've discovered that what mastitis and blocked ducts are is that we used to think it was literally the duct that was blocked. So we're trying to really knead it to get the duct moving, to get the milk moving in that duct. But what it actually is that it's the breast tissue that is inflamed. squishing the duct. So almost like, you know, when you've got your hose out filling the swimming pool and you hold it in between your hands, it's literally the outside area that is pushing the duct a little bit shut. So if we're going ahead with an electric toothbrush and kneading it, it's going to become more aggravated and more inflamed. So now we've discovered that actually cold is better to help with just reducing that inflammation. So it's that is such a simple way of knowing that things change quite dramatically. Like it's literally the opposite of what we used to say heat. Now we say cold. So, but it's knowing that we've done that research, and that's why things have changed with it.
Yeah, and also making sure that you're getting advice from professionals that are keeping up to date with that research. Like
Yeah.
I with all these things, make sure that the people you're getting advice from are constantly getting up to date advice.
Yeah. And what I would say about that is that sometimes your midwife, your health visitor, your GP may not be the best place to get support from, because they're brilliant in their own ways, but they don't have really specialized qualifications and knowledge on breastfeeding. And it is about finding those people that do have the additional knowledge, because some midwives and health visitors will go out of their way to learn a bit more, and some GPs will as well, but the majority of the time it's just kind of the baseline, and that won't be updated quite as often as we would ideally like it to be. So I think that's a good thing to be cautious about, is that actually, you think, oh, well, my midwife is coming around today. They may not be the best person, and it may be actually reaching out to find other specialist support, whether that is your local breastfeeding group, whether that is the National Breastfeeding Helpline, whether it is an IBCLC, a breastfeeding counsellor around your area. It's maybe just trying to outsource those people as well as that. And I think it's maybe looking into those people before you actually have your baby, not just panicking before, after you've had your baby and things are going wrong, and you're like, oh, well, the midwife's not being much of a help, I don't know what to do. And then you're trying to frantically find someone to support you. It's not the best time to find that support, but actually looking into it before you give birth, going, okay, well, where's my local breastfeeding support group? Who is someone that I can message? Where are the lactation consultants? And what's the National Breastfeeding Helpline? Let me save it in my phone so that I've got it ready. Things like that beforehand can make a massive difference, because it means that at the first sign of things being a little bit difficult, you can straight away speak to them and get that support, rather than you waiting until you're in a crisis point, which so many people do, wait until they're literally in that crisis point. And then it is so much harder to get back up, just at the first sign of things are really difficult at the moment. Let me just speak to the breastfeeding counsellor and I'll see what's happening and what support I can get. It makes a massive difference.
Yeah, and a great phrase to remember there is, when you're drowning is not the time for a swimming lesson. Don't wait until you are literally at 2 a.m. crying and your nipples are sore and the baby won't stop crying. Make sure you make those contacts, join those groups ahead of time. Something in my local area, we had a local breastfeeding support group, a Facebook group that was run by local peer supporters and the local feeding team. And so when I had my blocked duct at 2 a.m. with Wilfred and I was in tears and I was in pain, I put, a message out on this Facebook group and I was like, can anyone help me? What do I do? I had a message instantly from another mum that was also up breastfeeding her baby. So you make those connections ahead of time and it makes such a difference.
Oh, definitely. And those groups can be so helpful, because it doesn't mean that you have to speak to someone face to face. We've got the same in our area, a Facebook group, and you can post and it's private. No one else will see it, just the people that are in the group. And there's always going to be someone that is able to respond almost instantly, because there's either someone that's going to be awake with their breastfeeding child, there is going to be someone that's awake for some other reason, pregnancy, insomnia or something. There's always going to be someone that's up and ready to help you. And when it comes to breastfeeding and peer support, so other breastfeeding parents that haven't got any qualifications, honestly, just the cheerleading can make a massive difference as well. It doesn't have to be someone that's actually qualified. It can literally be a case of, oh my goodness, my baby's been cluster feeding for 4 hours. I'm absolutely shattered. I just don't know if I can do this anymore. And you get 5, 6, 7 mums going, I've been where you are. It gets better, I promise you. Oh God, it's really hard, isn't it? Solidarity. And you just get that and you're like, oh, not just me. It's not something that's wrong with me. And it's not you know, my baby, other people have gone through this and it will end as well. And that makes me feel so much better. That actual peer-to-peer support is just so invaluable. So just I think the key thing is finding your tribe. So finding those groups, finding people to talk to that are going to be on the same wavelength as you.
Yeah.
And sometimes this is why breastfeeding groups are so important, because sometimes you can go to other baby groups and be chatting about, you know, oh, my baby's, you know, waking this many times at night. And you might get another parent that hasn't breastfed just going, oh, we'll just get them bottles and, you know, they'll sleep better and stuff like that. And it's not the most helpful thing in that moment. Whereas actually in the breastfeeding groups, you'll have other people that have been through it and they'll know what you want out of it, and they'll give you that support of, yeah, I know it's hard, I've been where you are and all that, rather than trying to tell you to stop breastfeeding, because breastfeeding is almost seen as this like scapegoat with so many things. You know, your baby's not sleeping because of your breastfeeding, your baby is clingy, it's because you are breastfeeding, your baby has reflux, it's because you are breastfeeding. All these things, it's just constant, whereas actually a lot of the time it's not because you are breastfeeding. There is very, very, very rarely, I can't think of a problem off the top of my head where actually it is because of breastfeeding. You know,
Yeah.
there's something else going on.
Yeah, and actually it can be incredibly isolating if you're in a community where you are the only, like a family or whatever, where you are the only person that's breastfed, or a group of friends. You become almost like scared to voice any problems because you know you'll immediately be met with, oh, well, just give them a bottle. Oh, just stop breastfeeding. Whereas if you are in a breastfeeding family, a breastfeeding group of friends, breastfeeding community, then you know that you can just vent, you can just moan, because, you know, it is hard, you know, cluster feeding for 4 hours. Sometimes I just want to moan. I just want to say, do you know what? I'm tired and I'm touched out, without someone saying, well, just give them a bottle.
Yeah. You don't want to fix, you don't want something to fix it. You just want to say, this is bloody hard. And
Yeah.
someone to say, yeah, it is. That's okay. It is really hard and you're doing amazing. But yeah, it's hard. You just want that.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when it comes to like family and friends as well, and your partner, if you have a partner, is actually finding out before you have a baby, what are their thoughts on breastfeeding? You know, it's because that will make a massive difference, because you're going to be with them so often. You know, your mum might come around to the house quite often, your partner's going to be there very, very frequently. So it's actually finding out, well, what are your thoughts? What were your experiences on breastfeeding? What do you feel about it? And putting out what you want to do. Look, my boundaries are, I really, really want to breastfeed. I just want some support. I don't want to be told to stop. I want some support. If I'm struggling, please can you remind me of the local breastfeeding support group? Please can you remind me that, you know, I'm doing amazing. Please can you just be there to support me? And putting those boundaries in place before you have your baby, I think are so vital, because afterwards it can be so emotional. Your hormones are all over the place anyway. You're going to be probably a little bit at least sleep deprived because you started waking up quite frequently with a baby. And becoming a new parent is really hard as well, just emotionally. So it can be so much harder when actually after you have your baby and someone does go to, you know, your mum comes over and you're like, oh gosh, it's really hard and exhausting. They go, oh, let me give them a bottle. Come on, it'll be absolutely fine. And that's not what you want. That just becomes more emotional.
Yeah,
So you
what you
need to put
actually
those
want
boundaries
that
in place
what
first.
you want that person to
Yeah.
do is to go and push the hoover around, or do the
Yes.
laundry, or do the washing up. I don't want you to, you know, fix anything about breastfeeding, because nothing's broken. It's just
Yeah.
what it is, you know?
Yeah. Or just give me a hug and give me a cup of tea and tell me I'm doing an awesome job with feeding. That's all I want. But getting that out of the way before you have your baby is going to be so much easier to have that conversation first, before all everything goes to whack, compared to afterwards. And afterwards, it means you can just remind them and you can just go, look, remember what we spoke about with breastfeeding before I had baby? Can you just remember that conversation? And you don't have to actually repeat yourself then, because if you've had that conversation, they will remember. If you just tell them, look, remember what we spoke about, they'll go, oh yeah, okay, no problem. You don't have to
Yeah.
actually say the words.
Yeah. And I think another really important point to make on that is, I've had clients who they've had parents, mother-in-laws, whatever, that have bought the formula just in case. You know, they bought the little pre-made bottles of formula just in case. And if you have those little bottles of formula just in case, then you're more likely to use them.
Yeah.
Whereas if you really, really are adamant that, do you know what, you want your breastfeeding journey to work, don't have the just in case formula.
Yeah, don't have them just in case, because not only is it much easier to turn to them when things are a little bit hard, it just puts that doubt in your mind straight away. It's going immediately, I'm going to get these just in case. You're already telling yourself that actually you're probably going to need them and your body's probably not going to be able to do it. Whereas if you tell yourself, I'm not going to need formula, my body is going to be able to do it. It's those positive affirmations that we talk about so much in hypnobirthing. We talk about them constantly and how they are really, really powerful. If you're telling yourself that you need these formula bottles just in case, you're telling yourself that you're not going to be able to breastfeed probably, and you start to believe that. Whereas if you tell yourself that your body is going to be able to do it and you will breastfeed, you'll start to, believe that as well. The body is, and the mind is such a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And don't discount it. And honestly, those newborn formula bottles, I've got a bit of beef with those actually, because they are 70 mils, those newborn ones. A baby's tummy size on day one can handle about 5 to 7 mils of milk. That's about a
Exactly.
teaspoon.
Yeah.
So why on earth do we have formula bottles that probably wouldn't suit until a baby is about 2 weeks old? Why do we have them for a newborn? Because it means that, again, when you're in the hospital or after birth and you're sort of going, oh, feeding's not going very well, I might need to give a bit extra, and you think, the midwives might support you with, let's do some hand expressing, come on, and you literally get like a few drops out and a teaspoon worth, and then they go, okay, well, we might need to give a little bit of formula as well, here, let me get you one of the bottles, and it's 70 mils, and you look at your teaspoon worth of colostrum compared to this 70 mil bottle and you go, well, I'm definitely not making that much. You put doubt in your body, and actually 70 mils, these bottles should be much, much smaller. 70 mils is far, far too big
It
for a
is so
newborn.
misleading. And when you think about like the little syringes that you collect if you're colostrum harvesting beforehand, they're 1 mil. They are
Yeah,
one mil each. You
yeah,
don't need 70 mils for a newborn ever.
no. And that's something that really frustrates me, because again, it's just something that puts doubt in people and their bodies that, oh my God, well, the formula bottles are that big, I'm definitely not making that amount. And actually that's good. You shouldn't be making that amount on day 1 or 2 or 3.
No, you'd be engorged.
Really?
You'd be in a lot of pain.
Yeah. You should not be making that amount of milk. That would be far, far too much for a baby. But the problem is they've got these with the little teats on top, and they say, if they don't finish it, they need to throw it away. So then you're trying to probably push your baby to have this 70 mils when actually they don't need it. And then we're stretching their tummies, and then they don't want any breast milk.
And at
So
the same
it's
time,
just,
you're also telling your boobs not to produce that milk.
yeah. And that's exactly the thing. I think people really need to understand how breast milk production works to be able to have a positive breastfeeding experience, because if they don't understand that process, they're not able to make that milk, and then they're worrying about their milk supply. So literally the way it works on milk supply is milk removal. The more that your baby feeds, or if you are pumping, the more that you are pumping, the more milk you'll make. So a baby cluster feeds by coming off and on the breast really frequently for normally like a few hours at a time. They do that to increase your milk production. It doesn't mean that they're starving and they're hungry and, they're not getting the milk at that point in time. They're literally doing that because then it prepares your body to create more milk. It's like they say that it's putting in the order for the next day, because they are doing that feeding. It's like your breasts are like factories, not warehouses. So the breast milk is never empty. But what happens is if you are kind of keeping that baby up the breast and they're constantly feeding, it's giving your body a message that, hang on, guys, we need a bit more milk here because the baby is feeding a bit more. So we need to increase your milk supply. So it starts that process of increasing milk production straight away. And a lot of people will notice that cluster feeding and a baby feeding frequently as, actually, my baby's hungry, my milk isn't enough. Whereas actually it's really normal newborn behavior. It is actually perfect for increasing your milk supply. And if you do want to increase milk supply, having them at the breast as often as possible is the best way for it. I've spoken to lots of people in the past where they've had like, well, I'm just giving some formula just while my milk supply increases, but they're not actually expressing, they're not putting the baby to the breast anymore. I'm like, well, that milk supply is not going to increase by itself. It is on demand and supply. And I say it that way rather than supply and demand, because it is the baby demands it first and then the supply is made afterwards. So you need to have that baby at the breast as often as they want to. And that could be very, very frequently. That could be cluster feeding quite a lot. But that's good. That's really, really positive. That's increasing your milk production. And the first 2 weeks are really key to your milk production. If you can get that baby feeding as often as they need in that first 2 weeks, your milk production is going to be right up there very, very quickly. If you miss out on those first 2 weeks, it can be a little bit harder to get that milk supply up after that. So it's literally just my biggest suggestion for everyone if they're planning on breastfeeding, or anyone just full stop actually, after a baby, is just to spend those first 2 weeks at home in skin to skin contact, letting your baby feed as frequently as they want. Just tell visitors that now's not the time to come around, unless they're going to help you in terms of, cooking, cleaning, doing things around the house, then they shouldn't be coming round. And you should have that first 2 weeks with your baby, letting them have unlimited access to the breast to give you a really good boost and start with breastfeeding. And I've got my own personal experience on this. Like, first time, I didn't know anything about feeding. I didn't understand cluster feeding. I didn't know literally nothing, absolutely nothing. And I kind of would subconsciously push her to go a little bit further than, what she wanted to. I was like, oh, you can't be needing a feed already and all this sort of thing. And she ended up losing 9% of her birth weight. Luckily, we didn't get told to top up or anything like that. And she did increase her weight. But second time around, we literally just resided to the bed straight away. As soon as he was born, we just went to bed. And that is where I stayed for the first 2 weeks, in our pajamas all the time. And he only lost 2% of his birth weight. So a huge, huge difference by just me letting him feed at the breast. And it does make a big difference. If you can just get that at the start and let them feed as frequently as possible, it means that the weight loss is going to be less, which means there's less worry and less pressure to get that weight up again. If you get a big weight loss, they might start suggesting, oh, well, you need to top up, you need to go on a strict feeding schedule and stuff. And that can just throw things off a little bit. Whereas if you can avoid that in the first place by just letting them feed as often as they want, it boosts things for the future. And you kind of reap the benefits of it a little bit earlier, because it means that your baby has established your milk supply much quicker. So it means that you're able to just sit back and relax after a while because they've done it. They're not fighting against it. They're not trying to increase your milk production because you're actually trying to go, well, no, you only fed, half an hour ago. You can't need another feed now. You're just letting them. So then they're really happy a lot quicker because they've established your milk supply. And they're like, yeah, I've done my job. I've done my part. I can just chill now. And it becomes just much easier to just let them do it in those early weeks.
Yeah,
I've rambled loads then.
No, that's
sorry.
Fine. I think I'll just add as well is that if something feels unnatural, if you feel like you're having to force your child to go longer between feeds, and that's probably not natural. Like you and your baby in those early weeks and months, you are both running on pure instinct, pure intuition. And if your baby is wanting to do something, if your body's telling you to do something, then chances are you should do it.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. Listen to that instinct. I think it's really, really powerful. And I think it's where that instinct comes naturally, that we want our babies close. We want to feed them frequently. They don't want to go down, and we want to actually hold them a lot of the time. But we've been told by society that that's not what should be happening. And we're kind of listening to that. It's that niggling thing there. We're sitting there, we're holding our baby. It's society that's telling us to put them down. We don't want to. Instinctively, we want to actually hold them. That is literally everything that it is. You want to hold your baby all the time. It's natural. It's that hormone release that's there. So listen to that rather than societal pressure in terms of how to get through those early weeks.
Yeah, and it's really important to know, don't ever feel pressured into passing your baby around like a pass the parcel. If you choose to accept visitors in those first few weeks, then you might get people saying, oh, can I have a quick snuggle, and you might find there's a bit of pressure where they'll say, oh, actually, you're being selfish, don't hog the
Yeah.
baby. And you are not being selfish. This baby is not a toy.
Baby.
It's not a puppy. This
Yeah.
baby is your child. It's a human being developing bonds and emotions. So don't ever feel guilty. Don't feel pressured or gaslit into passing your baby around like a pass the parcel.
Yeah, that is the boundary that I had very much strict in place second time around. First time she was passed around on day 6 constantly. That probably didn't help her weight loss as well. But second time, I was just like, no, he's my baby.
Yeah.
I let my husband hold him, and my parents on Christmas Day, because we went round their house for Christmas, because he was born a week before Christmas. And anytime I needed a wee or have a shower, things like that, I was like, can you just hold him very quickly? And then as soon as I came back, I was like, he's mine again. Thank you very much. Like, he needed me, and I didn't want to pass him around, and I felt pressured to first time. So second time, I was just like, no, I am having very strict boundaries in place. This is what I need for me and my baby, and I'm going to do it. And I don't care if that upsets anyone. That's their problem, not mine.
Absolutely. And there's no such thing as making a rod for your own back or making bad habits, anything like that. If anyone says that to you, do you know what? Kick them out of your house.
It's total bullshit.
Yeah.
It is honestly complete bullshit. That rod for their back is a rod of independence for their life. We know that keeping your baby close and holding them frequently and responding to them creates them to be a more independent child, a more confident child, a more independent adult, and a more confident adult. Because do you know what? They know that we are there when they need them. So it's not a case of, oh, they know you're going to come. Well, yeah, that's good. They know that we're always going to be there when needed. So it means that actually they're more confident. And we've got so much research around that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that trust, isn't it? It's building up that trust. It's them knowing that you'll always be there. Whereas if they're constantly in that kind of mode of doubt, like, is mum coming to me this time?
Yeah.
Am I safe? Then that does create issues.
Yeah. Like my 1-year-old, we've co-slept from day 1 this time. And when he wakes up and I'm maybe downstairs just getting a few things done or watching the telly, he doesn't cry out. He literally just sits up in bed and kind of goes, Mama, because he knows that I'm going to be there. He doesn't cry out because actually I'm always going to be coming for him. So he doesn't panic. And it just kind of shows it there. He's actually very chilled and very relaxed because he knows that I'm always going to be there for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had a list of notes that you made, and we've kind of talked about all kinds of topics. So I don't know where we are on your list of notes. Like, so if you'd like to maybe carry on with your with your list of notes.
Yeah, there weren't very many things on there that were additionally to, because we've kind of covered quite a lot of stuff. My biggest top tips for getting a positive breastfeeding experience is literally kind of it goes down to 3 points for me. And one is researching normal baby behavior, which we've spoken about in detail, knowing actually what is normal for a baby. That is where so many worries come from. I speak to parent after parent worrying that my baby's not getting enough milk because they won't go down in their cot. And actually, it's just that they're a normal baby. It's nothing to do with breastfeeding. It's just that they are a baby. They have a survival instinct to need to be close. It is literally all about survival. So researching normal baby behavior.
Oh, and a good one, sorry, just to add on to that, is research and know when the major growth spurts and leaps are coming up. Because you find, you'll get to maybe like 11 weeks and you'll think, yeah, we've got a routine. Maybe that's what we're doing. And then suddenly that sleep regression hits and you're like, oh my God, what is happening? Am I losing my supply? Like, what is happening?
Yeah, kind of knowing what happens almost in that first year, that it isn't a linear experience. It is literally, it's up, down, up, down, up, down. It is constantly evolving and changing. So know that actually when you get to 8 weeks and they are sleeping better, it's not always going to be like that probably. It's going to go up and down. And that's also very, very normal as well. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And in that, knowing that as well, to expect what we like to call second night syndrome. A baby on night 1, they're very tired from birth. They pretty much sleep and you go, oh my goodness, I've got such a good, in quotation marks, baby. They're sleeping so well. This is really easy. And then on night 2, they wake, they cluster feed, they cry, they're unsettled, they shout at the breast when you're trying to latch them on. And you just go, what on earth has happened? This is really, really hard. This isn't like it was last night. Knowing to expect that makes things a ton easier, because it means that you can maybe get that sleep in during that second day in preparation for the night, and just being prepared and knowing that, okay, this might happen and that's okay. It's normal. It's not a problem, and it won't last either. I know it feels like in the moment this is your life forever, but it won't be. But second night syndrome, really just know to expect that. So researching normal behavior, tip number one. Tip number two is knowing how milk production works, because if you understand that, you understand that that cluster feeding is normal behavior as well, and that's all working towards your milk production as well. And then number three is knowing the signs of that you're actually making enough milk and that your baby is getting enough milk. Because again, if you can look at that normal baby behavior and the baby's cluster feeding and you're panicking, you go, oh God, do I have enough milk? If you know the signs of they're getting enough wet and dirty nappies, they are sucking and swallowing regularly, and depending on the point of time, how old a baby is, weight loss, weight gain, that gives you a really good idea of actually that you do have enough milk, and that gives you that reassurance. And also knowing that pumping is not an indication of your milk supply. I hear so many people saying, well, I was worried about my milk supply, so I decided to pump and I only got 10 mils, so that must be all that my baby is getting, so I don't have enough milk. A babe, when you try to pump, it is not the same as a baby feeding. Babies are much more effective at removing the milk. So if you're pumping, it literally means nothing in terms of your milk supply. It's good to help encourage your milk production if you aren't feeding at the breast, but it doesn't mean anything to do with your milk supply or baby's milk intake. And the same as a baby being unsettled or feeding frequently, that doesn't indicate milk intake. So actually knowing what are the signs. So basically, nappy output is the key one that you can keep a track of really, really easily in terms of your baby getting enough milk, and you can use that as reassurance, because a lot of people stop breastfeeding early due to perceived low milk supply, not true low milk supply, perceived. They think that they haven't been making enough milk, whereas actually the likelihood is that they have, but they just haven't been given the tools to know if they were making the right amount of milk. So those are kind of like my 3 top tips in preparing to breastfeed positively, because it just gives you the knowledge and the information and the confidence as well. It's not just a health professional saying, oh yeah, breastfeeding looks like it's going well. It's giving you the tools as the breastfeeding parent to kind of look at it yourself and go, what are the things that means it's going well? And giving you the confidence to go through breastfeeding yourself, rather than sort of relying on a healthcare professional. If you can trust yourself and trust your body, honestly, it does wonders for your breastfeeding journey. It really makes a massive difference. And I think my final tip for feeding is literally just, I'm going to end it all the time and I talk about it constantly, but it's skin to skin. Get skin to skin all the time. And when I say skin to skin, I don't just mean a quick 10 minutes here and there. I literally mean staying skin to skin for like the whole day. People always get very shocked when I sort of suggest get some skin to skin, and they say, oh, when should I do it? And I go, as soon as you wake up to before you go to bed, literally that whole day. And they're like, really? That long? I'm like, yes, that long. Skin to skin is not just a nice thing to do. It is treatment. It is therapy. It is medicine. Do it all the time. And if you've ever got a problem with breastfeeding, skin to skin is going to be helpful. Like, baby's not latching, skin to skin. Baby's struggling to gain weight, skin to skin. Yes, it's not going to do everything, but I'm telling you, it really does help. And just doing it as often as possible. Don't just do it straight after birth. Do it constantly. It makes the world of difference when it comes to it. And that's a really good way of keeping visitors away as well. Because if they're not comfortable with coming to your house and seeing you in skin-to-skin contact with your baby, they're probably not the right people to be there. And if they are comfortable with it, they're probably going to be the people that you actually want there to support you. Your partner, your best friend that you're really, really close to, maybe your sister, your mum. If they're all people that are comfortable and you're happy with seeing you naked with your baby in skin-to-skin contact, they're probably the ones that are going to be the most supportive and most helpful in those early weeks in your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's your house, that's your safe space.
Yeah.
And if someone is coming into your house and telling you to cover up, or they don't want to see your breasts or anything like that, then they do not belong in your inner circle.
No. And that's something that I firmly believe as well. If you're inviting people to your house and you're going to be breastfeeding, but they're not comfortable with seeing it, or you're not comfortable breastfeeding in front of them, are they the best people to be there in that moment? And it's okay to decline people coming. You don't have to be polite and go, oh no, they really want to come and they want to see us. I know they're being really nice. You don't have to do that. As Brits, we tend to do that quite a lot. But put yourself first, because you're only going to go through this, the early weeks once. Even if you have more babies, that's still going to only happen once with that baby. So you can be selfish at these times. You can think about yourself and think about your baby and do what is right for you and for them, not what's right for everyone else around you.
Absolutely. And I have just like a couple more points to make of some of the things we talked about earlier. One is you touched on pumping, and there on social media we see these images of like full freezer stashes and stuff like that, right? And I just really want to iterate that if you're not leaving your baby with anyone, there's no need to pump. You do not have to have a full freezer. And I think it can get a little bit misconstrued, because we see a lot of American ladies where they have to go back to work at 6 weeks, whereas in the UK we're very, very fortunate to have maternity leave up until a year and beyond in a lot of cases. So if you don't have to pump, you don't have to pump. Like, don't feel like you have to be pumping. Because in those first 6 weeks, actually, if you're pumping, you're telling, talk about supply and demand, or demand and supply, you're telling your boobs that you've got twins, or that your baby's really hungry, and so it's going to start producing loads more milk, which your baby doesn't necessarily actually need, and that can cause engorgement and mastitis.
And that's a really important thing to notice, actually, that a lot of these people that do have these freezer stashes, they probably have a massive, massive oversupply. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Like you said, it puts you at greater risk of engorgement and mastitis. It's not helpful. And actually, it's not a normal milk supply. That's not normal. That's quite abnormal when it comes to having a massive freezer stash. If people are pumping on top of breastfeeding, what is normal is literally maybe getting 10 to 15 mils of milk. Totally normal. That's not a bad thing. But because we've seen so many people have these massive freezer stashes, you go, oh my God, 10 to 15 mil, that's nothing. I've got no milk. Oh my God, I'm panicking. Because actually, that's totally normal. It's really, really normal. And I think, again, it's in that society that we need to pump, and we need to pump to be able to help other people with bottle feeding and the bond that people get from bottle feeding. And I always kind of prompt people when it comes to, you must use a bottle to bond with your baby. Have you ever fed your husband or your best friend? Do you have a bond with them?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, my eyes went really wide then.
Yeah.
But, I hear this so much. They're like, oh, I want to pump so that dad can bond with the baby. I'm like, breastfeeding is literally the only thing that dad can't do. Okay, dad can have skin
There's
to
a
skin.
million things.
Skin to skin can be done by dad. Dad can do baths. Dad can do baby wearing. Dad can change nappies. Dad can do sensory things. Like, breastfeeding is literally the only thing that your partner can't do. So if you don't want to pump, if you're finding it stressful, don't push yourself to do that just so the partner can bond with baby. That's not necessary.
They do not need it. No. And I did an Instagram post a little while ago of sort of saying, oh, they must have a bottle to be able to bond with their dad. And then I put on loads of photos of at the moment, my son, so my youngest, with dad, having loads of fun and smiling and giving kisses. And I was like, totally ruined their bond completely. You're right. I should have given him a bottle so that he could bond with him. He's never once had a bottle, and dad is much more the preferred person than me. If we both go to pick him up from nursery, he'll go to dad. He won't come to me for a cuddle. He'll go straight to dad. He prefers him. So
it's the same with
Annabelle.
Not need a bottle. My youngest, she is such a daddy's girl. Oh my God, right? She'll literally like come over to me, demand boob. Like, she won't smile or anything. She'll demand boob and then go off like giggling and smiling after daddy for playtime, Like, I'm literally just the milk machine.
Literally. That's how it is now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think you do not need to do bottles. And sometimes if you're feeling that pressure, it can be so much harder to pump on top. And then you've got to wash. And then you're working on really making sure that you don't miss that feed when they do give that bottle. Because if you miss that feed, that's going to be lowering your milk supply. And sometimes it's just more hassle than it's worth. And like you said, they can do so much more. They can have that skin to skin contact. And you don't need to pump for people to have a bond with them, because I can be sure that I've never fed my husband and I have a lovely bond with him. So I'm not quite sure where this feeding to bond has come from.
No, exactly. And you don't get any extra rest. You don't get any extra
No,
sleep from someone else bottle feeding your baby either. Like because you still have to, as you say, you still have to pump. You still have to be awake for that time. So
yeah, yeah. It's sometimes much more helpful if someone else can get up in the morning when your baby has woken up for the day and take them for like an hour or two, and you can stay in bed and get a little bit of extra rest. That's
yeah,
what I find is the easiest thing for me. If I've had a bit of a rough night, and I'll just say to my husband, look, can you get up with him? I'm shattered. I just need to have a little bit of extra sleep. And sometimes it's literally only half an hour, and I actually feel ready for the day after that.
yeah,
It's not
yeah,
much.
yeah. And there was one more thing that I had a point to make on. Oh, I remember. Right. Something that took me by surprise was on, somewhere between day 3 and day 5, when your colostrum starts to transition to mature milk, and you just burst into tears for no reason. You get
Yeah.
a
Oh
real
my
kind of,
gosh.
you get a real like rush of hormones, and you
Mm,
just, it's very up and down, and you don't know what it is. But I'm just
mm.
warning you guys,
Yeah.
when that happens, it's very, very normal. The hormones are all over the place, and you'll just burst into tears or get angry at random things. And that's very, very normal.
Yeah. Just go with it. It's absolutely normal. I think that is definitely something that surprises a lot of people when it comes to not even just feeding, just the postnatal period. And suddenly they're just like, I'm just crying my eyes out all the time. And I'm not quite sure why. And it's normally just for that one day, and then you're fine the next day. It's just because those hormones literally almost do a complete flip, like the total opposite of what you've been used to for the last 9, 10 months. So it's normal for it to just kind of throw you a little bit. And I definitely, again, this is just more instilling into staying at home, staying in that skin to skin contact, because that helps. The last thing you want to be doing on that day 3, 4, 5, whichever day it happens on, is to be out and about, and suddenly you're in the supermarket and you just cry. That's not what you want. You want to be at home. You want to be in a safe place where you can just let it all out and eat a ton of chocolate at that time to make you feel a little bit better. And
Exactly.
yeah, don't get out and about. I think that is literally the biggest takeaway, is just staying at home for as long as you possibly can, because it does help. And I've been there from experience, one where I got out and about as quick as possible, and the second where I just did not want to. We went out for on day 6 to register him, and we were out for an hour, and by the end I was crying in the car. Like, I want to get home. I want to get home. And we got home, both of us got into our pajamas, and we just stayed there in bed for the rest of the day, and it felt amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know exactly what the figures are, but I know that during COVID, because women were just basically at home and they didn't have visitors,
Yeah,
breastfeeding success rates shot right up.
they did actually. Yeah, and it happened. It with COVID, it kind of happened in either one of two ways. It either went that things went really, really bad because they didn't have the support, because people weren't allowed to go into houses, or actually they were really successful because all they had to do was sit and feed their baby, and they could actually focus on that rather than having the additional pressures of family coming round and getting out to do things. They could literally just focus on feeding their baby. And it just shows, doesn't it, that it really does help. But we're in a very lucky situation now where you can have the support in your house if you feel like you need to, and if you feel like you need a professional to come and support you. But you can also stay in your house and not have to go out anywhere. You can do both. It doesn't have to be one or the other now.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been such an amazing chat. Now, just before we sign off, would you just like to talk about some of the breastfeeding services that you offer, so that if any of the ladies listening do want to do some work with you, if they do want to get themselves prepared, how do they do that?
Yeah, so I do preparing to breastfeed sessions, and I do those either in person or over Zoom, online, over the phone. I really love doing those because it really helps to give people that confidence before actually going into feeding their babies. And we do a really good personalized feeding plan as well, making sure that it is something that works for them. I have feeding support calls as well, just, if you want to touch base, regardless of what's happening. And this is for both breastfeeding and bottle feeding as well, if you do need a bit of support with bottle feeding as well. There isn't a one or other. So if you need to just touch base about something, we can have a quick call. And then I do breastfeeding visits as well. So obviously that would be something for only around this kind of area. Can't really head all the way up to like Manchester for that sort of thing, but can do it close to here. So if you are around, you can always get in touch to have a breastfeeding visit. And then obviously I do hypnobirthing as well. So kind of my whole life is basically vaginas and boobs at the moment, hence the name of my business. It's literally everything that I am.
Excellent. Thank you so much. What I'll do is I'm going to put your contact details in the description of this podcast episode so that if anyone does want to get in touch with you, then they have everything they need there. So do you have any parting thoughts, any last words of wisdom for anyone listening?
Skin to skin. Don't forget skin to skin. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Bea, for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, and you.
Bye.
Bye.